There's a 30-minute window every afternoon that most Western parents treat as transition time, the noisy, unstructured gap between school pickup and homework, dinner prep, activities, or whatever fills the rest of the day. Japanese parents treat that same window differently, not with more structure, with more deliberate emptiness. And the developmental research on what happens in the hour after children return from school suggests that how you handle that specific transition, not the homework hours, not the dinner conversation, but those first 30 minutes when the child walks through the door, may matter more for the parent-child relationship than almost anything else that happens during the day. When a Japanese child comes home from school, the interaction begins with a ritual exchange so consistent across Japanese households that it's practically invisible to the families doing it. The child says, "Tadaima," literally, "I am now here. I have returned." The parent, whoever is home, responds immediately, "Okaeri," welcome back, welcome home. 2 words, every single day, without variation. This sounds ceremonial, and in one sense it is, but what those 2 words do functionally is not trivial. They create a threshold, a distinct, recognized moment of return. The child left this space this morning. Now they have come back. The space and the person in it receive them with a specific sound that marks the transition. For the child's nervous system, which has spent 6 to 7 hours in a sustained state of social and academic effort, managing peer dynamics, meeting academic demands, navigating the sensory complexity of a school environment, performing competence continuously, that threshold signal begins a shift. The outside world mode, with its vigilance and performance requirements, starts to soften. The nervous system begins to receive the information that the context has changed. This is not a small thing. The nervous system transition from school mode to home mode is not automatic. It requires signals. And a child who doesn't receive clear signals of that transition, who walks from a school environment directly into homework demands, screens, activity logistics, or an interrogation about the day, doesn't complete the transition. They stay, physiologically, in a partially activated state that makes genuine emotional availability, learning, and connection significantly harder to access. The Tadaima Okaeri exchange is, among other things, a neurological decompression trigger, a signal that it is safe to arrive. What happens in the minutes immediately after that exchange in Japanese households is just as deliberate. There is almost always a small food offering, something warm and simple, a bowl of miso soup, onigiri, a piece of fruit with tea. Not an elaborate snack, and not part of any meal, just something small, warm, given quietly, without expectation of conversation. This is physiological as much as cultural. Blood glucose drops significantly over the course of a school afternoon. The prefrontal cortex, the brain structure most responsible for emotional regulation, complex social reasoning, and meaningful communication, is highly sensitive to glucose availability. A child with low blood sugar at 3:30 p.m. is a child whose emotional regulation is genuinely diminished, not behaviorally, biologically. The small, warm food restores baseline glucose in a way that the nervous system can use quickly. The warmth triggers a mild parasympathetic response, the rest and digest state, the physiological opposite of the activated school mode. The act of receiving food, given without condition or demand, communicates something the body processes before the mind does. This place is safe. The people here care for me. I don't have to perform anything to receive what I need. The Japanese mother who places a bowl of warm soup in front of her returning child without asking anything of them is not being passive. She is executing with precision the fastest possible physiological preparation for genuine connection. The silence that accompanies the snack is part of the design. Most Western parents, when a child returns home, experience an impulse to connect, to find out how the day went, to check in on friendships and learning and mood. To Jap use of the connection opportunity the arrival moment seems to provide. This impulse is loving and understandable. It is also developmentally mistimed. A child who has just walked through the door is not in the neurological state that supports reflection, retrospection, or emotional disclosure. The transition from school mode to home mode is not complete. The prefrontal cortex is still managing the residue of the day's social and academic demands. The emotional content of the day, what happened, how it felt, what matters, is not yet accessible in the organized way that conversation about it requires. How was your day? The most common parental after-school question in the Western world. Ask the child to reach backward into a state they've just left, organize its contents into communicable form, and present them while still in a state of physiological fatigue and incomplete transition. The reliable answer, fine or nothing, is not evasion, it is accuracy. The child genuinely doesn't have access to the day in any organized way yet. Japanese mothers understand this by instinct and cultural transmission. The unspoken rule in the first minutes after school is no demands, no questions, no logistics, no homework discussion, no reports on the child's performance or the schedule for the rest of the day. Just the snack, just the presence, just the quiet. The developmental research supports this completely. Studies of parent-child communication patterns after school found that children disclose significantly more about their emotional inner lives, the things that actually happened, the social difficulties, the small triumphs, the fears. When the after-school transition included unstructured downtime before any questioning, compared to households where the questioning began at arrival. The disclosure doesn't happen during the silence, it happens after it. 10 or 15 or 20 minutes into the quietness, something in the child's nervous system finishes the transition. The day begins to reorganize internally. And then, often without prompting, the child begins to talk. Not in response to a question, but spontaneously, because the decompression created the conditions for it. The parent who waits, who offers food and presents and silence and resists the impulse to reach for the day's content too soon, is the parent who actually gets the phase, not because they were strategic, but because they gave the nervous system what it needed to become available. There's a related practice worth naming, which is how Japanese parents ask questions when they do ask them. The question, "How was your day?" is a closed system. It invites a summary, which requires the organization of information that isn't yet organized. It produces fine because fine is fine, the only honest answer to a question that big, that early. Japanese parents, when they do engage conversationally after school, tend to ask specific, concrete, low-stakes questions, not about performance or events, but about sensory, physical, and social specifics. What did you eat at lunch today? Did you sit next to the same person as yesterday? Was it cold outside at recess? These questions are easy to answer. They require no emotional organization. They don't carry evaluative weight, and something interesting happens when you ask them. A detail leads to a story leads to an emotion leads to the thing that actually mattered about the day, the thing the parent was genuinely hoping to hear, arriving naturally, without being requested. The conversation strategy works because it respects the sequence, sensory and concrete first, emotional and complex after. The child's nervous system can provide sensory information before it can provide emotional information. Starting with what the child can access opens a door through which everything else eventually walks. The cumulative effect of this after-school practice, the threshold ritual, the small food offering, the protected silence, the concrete first questions, is not visible in any single afternoon. It is visible across months and years in the quality of the relationship between parent and child. Developmental researchers studying parent-child attachment through middle childhood and into adolescence have consistently found that the strength of the parent-child connection during the teenage years, the degree to which adolescents feel genuinely known by and close to their parents, is most predicted not by special occasions or dramatic conversations, but by the cumulative quality of ordinary daily interactions. The 5-minute conversations while eating, the nothing moments that are not nothing. The Tadaimi Okaeri exchange, repeated 3,000 times across a childhood, is not a formality. It is an accumulated body of evidence deposited daily into the child's nervous system that says, "You belong here, you are received here, this place knows you have returned." The silences over the snack bowl, the questions about lunch, the unhurried presence of a parent who is not yet asking for anything, these are the materials from which emotional connection is actually built, not from grand gestures or intentional family meetings, but from these small, consistent, ordinary acts of being present at the right moment in the right way. Japanese parents didn't design this as a developmental program. They inherited it as a cultural practice, transmitted across generations so reliably that most of them couldn't articulate it as a decide practice at all. It is simply what you do when your child comes home. What the research adds is this: what you do when your child comes home may be the most important parenting you do all day. Not the lessons, not the homework, supervision, not the bedtime conversation. The first 30 minutes after the door opens. Show up for those 30 minutes. Give the snack. Hold the quiet. Wait. The conversation you're hoping for will come. It always comes after the silence, not instead of it.